Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session on performing poetry. We have with us Lemn Sissay from the UK, who will perform some poetry for us. Now, Lem is basically, as he says, a poet, not a performer. So there's a slight contradiction on terms where the title of the session is concerned. Can you hear me? Sorry. But let us listen to, watch and hear Lem in a few minutes. I just want to introduce him. With much, he's an MBE, a serious writer. He's been writing all his life. His origin is from the UK. He's born in the UK. His parentage was from Ethiopia. Very briefly, that's his introduction. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to ask Lem now to recite. We'll have a session of his recitation, reading, performance, whatever way you want to call it. Then we'll have a brief question and answer. And then after that, again, we'll have a little more of the recitation, reading, performance, whatever you want to call it. Finally, we'll throw it open to everybody else to ask any questions they want to or make any other comments they want to. Okay, so having said that, I hand over to Lemn Sissay.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. I shall begin with a poem. Firstly, it's a real honor to be here. And the first poem I would like to read for you is called Morning Breaks. And you know, we could turn the sound down a bit. Excuse me. We could turn the sound down a bit. There's a little echo on there that could come off a little bit. Even more. Actually, we don't need it. Do we need it? Do we need it? We don't really need it, do we? But then if I speak to you now like this, what will happen is it's being videoed, right? As I can see. And it being videoed means that the sound will not be the same when it's watched on video. And the fact is that whenever you go to a poetry reading, whatever you want to call it, whether it's however you want to define it, it is what it is here. And it often cannot be replicated via direct film. Does that make sense? The first poem that I would like to read for you is called Morning Breaks, and it's from my book Morning Breaks in the Elevator. I've written poetry since I was when I was in my mother's womb. I sent her a text. It's always been that way. I couldn't have done anything else. And yet, a lot of poets are doctors and poets, or lawyers and poets, or teachers and poets. You can have your cake and eat it. What I'm not doing here is trying to talk more than read. I'm going to read for 15 minutes, and then we'll have questions. Morning breaks. They always said I was over the edge. And now I really am. By the way, if anybody's told you that you shouldn't be a particular way and you followed the route of your instinct, then this poem is for you. They always said I was over the edge, and now I really am, over the edge. But as I dropped in a gasp of air, I grasped a branch that I hoped had its roots in the rock, or rock-solid roots. But there's a breeze blowing, a stunning storm coming. Thickening ink spills on a bleating paper sky. A crowd of rain on the horizon staggers nearer. I sway so, I know so, I slip a little more. I sway so, I know so, I grip a little more. These tender fingers in a clenched fist. I must have slipped my back as I fell. It hurts like a howl. It stings like a scowl, weeps and stings again. And the pain develops muscles that create mouths that simulate sounds of whole cities screaming. There's a storm coming, a coming storm. Dust spits from the cliff top into my river eyes, forcing tears over the banks to flood me. I will not drown in them. I will not drown. I am hanging on. I am hanging on. In the zip of a thick ribbon of wind, a god or a devil appears floating in front of me and tells me in the hunch of a New York accent, let go. Let go. Death is the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end. And he continues for 41 days and 41 nights. Death is the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end of the... And in a crack of lightning, the devil or the god has vanished. There's nothing more for me to concentrate on but a storm, the sky, and my breaching back, and the cliff, and the edge, and the uprooting branch, and my knuckles so sore, cracked and numb, they favour a knot of bleeding wood. If I look down, and I do look down, I see that blood has poured from my back, seeped along the smoothness of my backside, slid beneath me, coiled its way seductively around my thighs, my knees, my ebonized legs, and it pours in abundance from my feet and skydives, and I watch these red tears fall forever and transform into explicit flowers as they reach the floor. I will not become one. I am hanging on. I am hanging on. Whispers from above me. From above me, whispers gather. The cliff ledge lined with edgy people of all colours. Some humming, amazing grace. Some simply staring. Some I saw pointing down at my back and wincing. A bearded man with his hand on a Bible or a red book or a revolutionary book or a white book or a leather book or a dark green book shouted down to me in sermonic tones, deeper than the sea, let go! In the name of... Let go! Breathless I whispered, I will not fall, never have. A nervous follower peeps down and offers the advice that there's someone down there. They'll catch you. There's someone down there. They'll catch you. And before I get a chance to answer, they erupt into a sky-shattering, someone's crying, Lord, let go! Someone's crying, Lord. The harmony of their collective voices woke the spirit of the sky, and they threw crosses at me. It's raining crosses. I looked down past my feet, a devil or a god, a man the size of a pea is mouthing the words up to me. Let go! Night time was approaching. Breathless I whispered, I will not fall, never have, never will, not fall, never have, never will. And as quick as they came, it was as quick as they were gone. But I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on. Darkness cloaked the horror of nighttime, of gangrenous spirits that fed upon open wounds. As lightning struck, I saw glimpses of their faces, demons whose countenance had slipped, whose fingers had stretched, whose nails had curled, whose breath stank so viciously that I spewed into the sea my mantra, I'm hanging on, I'm hanging on, I'm hanging on, I'm hanging on, I'm hanging on throughout darkness and fear until sunrise and the stillness of morning breaking. I was a silhouette, hanging from a branch against a chalky cliff. Only the sound of my trickling blood and my breaking by and the back and my moaning sky for comfort. My shadow stretched across the cliff like a script title on handmade paper. The sulking storm retreated into the horizon to recollect, the sea trying to throw off its reflection, and I listened to the tearing of my back flesh as I hanged, the flapping wet skin of my blooded back as it hanged. Tears painted salt veins on my ebonized skin, and as that stark sunlight skidded across a blooded sky, I sensed the presence of two symmetrical shadows descending. They stretched seemingly, even pushed back the clouds seemingly, and I felt them push warm air into my face, saw them in the corner of each of my eyes, magnificent wings, and I felt new muscles in my back, and my chest expand with air, further and further, a new air and a new spirit, and there, with not a soul around me, I unpeeled my tender fingers from that dew-drenched branch. I let the sun pour into my eyes, and finally, after years, I let go. Why? Because I was growing wings all the time, and I can fly. Now, it was Valentine's Day. Now, some of you may have read that poem. Some of you may have got halfway through that poem and thought, well, it's a bit long. And obviously, one of you did. And if you did, it's okay. It's all right, because that can happen sometimes. And also, I'm speaking in English. And I know that most of you, 99.9% of you, understand it. In fact, I know that 100% of you understand English. However, I know that less than 100% of you will feel as confident about understanding English. Maybe 99%. I don't understand more people that speak my own language than those who don't. Understand more people that speak my own language than those who don't. Do you know what I mean? It's the same for you. Right, Muslim, right, absolutely. And I sort of wonder sometimes about the nature of language. We forget to listen. We forget to listen. Yesterday when Mr. Hussein was speaking on stage, he spoke of magic realism. And that was the only word I understood when he spoke. And I turned to, was it you, Tala? Yeah. I turned to Tala and I said, he is speaking about how magic realism has been a part of the writings of Pakistan literature since it began. And yet this new word is being used now as if to reinvent something that was always a gift to the Pakistani writer. I said that to you, did I not?
You said it to me.
I said it to you, sorry, Syra. Always tell her, sorry. And so language is as much about not being frightened to not understand. And that's a blessing for any of us. Anyway, I'm talking too much and I should be reading my poems. So it was Valentine's Day yesterday, and I tend to talk too much. Valentine's Day yesterday, and this poem is called Invisible Kisses, and it's a love poem. And it gets read at a wedding somewhere in the world about once a month. And do I get paid? No. Do I get paid? No. Oh, we read your poem at our wedding. Oh, really? You paid me? No. I swear. But I read this yesterday to some incredible students, and I want to share it with you. Invisible Kisses. If there was ever one whom when you were sleeping, who would wipe your tears when in dreams you were weeping. Think of the person you love. If there was ever one whom when you were sleeping, who would wipe your tears when in dreams you were weeping, who would offer you time when others demand, and whose love lay more infinite than grains of sand. If there was ever one to whom you could cry, who would gather each tear and blow it dry, who would offer help on the mountains of time, and who would stop to let each sunset soothe your shades of mind. If there was ever one to whom, when you run, who will push back the clouds so that you're bathed in sun, who would open arms if you would fall, who would show you everything if you lost it all. If there was ever one whom when you achieve was there before the dream, and even then believed, who would clear the air when it's full of loss, count love before cost. If there was ever one whom when you are cold will summon warm air for your heart to hold, who would make peace in pouring pain and make laughter fall in falling rain. If there was ever one who can offer you this and more, who in keyless rooms can see open doors, who in open doors can see open fields, and in open fields see harvests yield, then see only my face in the reflection of these tides, through the clear water, beyond the river's side. All I can send is love, and all this is a poem and a necklace of invisible kisses. Thank you. I'm shouting, which does something to the sharing of a poem. I'm not a shouter. This poem is called Suitcases and Muddy Parks, and it's about proving yourself to your parents. Hello. You say I'm a lying child, I say I'm not, you say there you go again. Do you not think the poem should end there? You say I'm a lying child, I say I'm not, you say there you go again. You say I'm a rebellious child, I say no I'm not! You say there you go again. Quite frankly, Mum, I've never seen a rebellious child before, and when my friend said, race you through the park, you know, the muddy one, I didn't think about the mud. I didn't think about the mud. When you said, why are you dirty? I could hear the anger in your voice. I said, I raced my mates through the park. You said it was deliberate. I said I didn't. I mean, I did, but it wasn't. You said I was lying. I said, no, I'm not. You said, there you go again. Later, in the dawn of adolescence, it was time for my leave. I with my suitcase and social workers. Sometimes I would run back to you like a child through a muddy park, adult achievements tucked under my arm. Then I would explain them with a childlike twinkle in my eye, thinking any mother would be proud. But your eyes, desperately trying to be wise and unrevealing, reveal all. Still, you fell back into the heart of the same rocking chair, saying, there you go again. And I did go. And I have gone. Thank you. So I'll read one more poem and then we'll have questions. Yes, that's about 15 minutes. Yeah, that's how this is going to roll. So the final poem that I'll read for you before we have the questions is from my children's book. I think Harry Potter is Pakistani. I swear. I know you think that I'm playing to the audience here, but and I'm published by Bloomsbury, who publish Harry Potter. In fact, when I get back to England, they will be publishing my play, a play that I've written about, which is a book by a writer called Benjamin Zephaniah in England. Tall, wonderful human being who I'm sure has been to Pakistan at some time. If he hasn't, he would be great here. He's a wonderful human being, and yeah. So they publish this little book of poems. I write poetry because poetry, for me, is I think we think in poetry and we speak in inadequate sentences, and yeah, I'll speak more about that when we. This book is based on Rudyard Kapuscinski's Downfall of an Autocrat, which is written about the downfall of the Emperor Haile Selassie, who is from where my parents are from in Ethiopia. I try to tell that to little children, but they never understand it. For those who came in, I'm going to read a poem, a children's poem from a children's book which I wrote. In fact, I'm going to read this one. It's called Pass It On. And it really is based on Rudyard Kapuscinski's Downfall of an Autocrat. But this poem is about when a group of people have fallen out with each other. Tell Brian, to tell Jane, to tell Janine, to tell Germaine, to tell June, to tell Maxine. You'll get the rhyming, you know. Tell Brian, to tell Jane, to tell Janine. For those of you who've just come in, the whole reading has not been like this. Just so you know. It was brilliant before. And then I moved on to the children's poem. Tell Brian, to tell Jane, to tell Janine, to tell Jill. I love reading for little children. I don't do it anymore since the court case, but I actually do love reading because it's the way you can read one poem and they go again. You can do a whole gig on one poem. It's great. And whenever the teacher criticises me, I say, don't depress me. So, you know, I'm sweeping up. I am the one multicultural. Oh, we could talk about that. Please don't take that literally for anybody who thinks that I do that. I don't. Pass it on. Tell Brian, to tell Jane, to tell Janine, to tell Germaine, to tell June, to tell Maxine, to tell Linda, to tell Lucinda, to tell Mel, to tell Gunnar, to tell Mizrat, to tell Del, to tell Ashraf, to tell Akin, to tell Jimmy, to tell Nadia, to tell Nazreen, to tell Timmy, to tell Lynn, to tell Jim, to tell Anne, to tell Jill, to tell Joanne, to tell Jan, to tell Joe, to tell Jack, to tell John. I'm not talking to him. Or anyone. We have travelled in 15 minutes from a poem about wings to that. And it's all good. Shall we?
Shall I come up?
You're not going now. You've seen that one poem and you're going, aren't you? That's amazing. It's okay.
We promise to come back.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so performing poetry. You used a lovely phrase right now when you said thinking poetry and speaking inadequate sentences. You want to enlarge on that one?
Not really. Well, firstly, I should say that I don't feel like yes, I will. But firstly, I would like to say that I don't feel like I perform. Because I don't, I know that sounds strange, but I get in the poem. What I try to do for me, didn't need that. It's perfect now. What I try to do for me, thank you. What I try to do for me is I try to get a small percentage of what it felt like when I wrote something, when I wrote it. A small percentage of that feeling I try to get back to when I'm reading the poem. And that has no laws. You can't give structure to why a writer writes. There's something magical that happens when you write poetry, aside from the structural stuff, which is quite easy to debate because it's very linear, it's very understandable, so people will. But there is something greater, which is why poetry is in the Quran, why it's in the Buddhist faith, why it's in the Hindu faith, why it's sung, why it's, there's something greater, and it's that I try to get back to. And it's impossible, because poems come from some incredible place, which is in us all, I think we're born creative, and we sort of teach ourselves to not see the creativity that we use in our lives every single day. And I think writers are lucky, to be frank, because we've got a fast track to it. Everybody's got it, but we've got to, so I don't know why. So I don't feel like I perform. I don't have a set. I'm not a, I'm not a turn. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to. Yeah, and I think it's very precious process. Very precious.
Okay.
And yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
But here's the difficulty. If I write a poem, and I do write poetry, I print it, put it in a book and put it on the shelf. And if somebody wants to read it, they read it. And it's going to be the same every time anybody reads it, whether I'm there or not.
But it's never the same, is it?
I agree, but whether I'm there or not, it's that person reacting. With your kind of poetry, it's going to vary from performance to performance, inevitably. There'll be some variation.
Yes.
Some days you've got a cold.
Yes.
Some days you're angrier than other days.
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's going to make a difference. Two, I can't go back to it as a listener, as a reader, I can't go back to it because you're not there.
Yes. I mean,
it's
yes.
a conceptual.
Where are we going?
I'm not quarreling.
Where are we going?
We're not going anywhere. We're exploring. We're exploring.
I'm being deconstructed, and I'm very scared. No, I'm joking. I'm sorry. I'm not the easiest. No, you can deconstruct me. I can deconstruct myself. I'm quite happy to.
That's a different
Yeah.
I'm having.
Yes. I write my poetry on the page, and it's the most personal relationship. And then I read it. And if I'm in the mood to read it in a different way, I'll read it in however I want to. But I don't need to perform. Maybe that's not true.
We all need to perform.
Maybe. My relationship is with writing. I could never read to you if I was not confident about my relationship with what I've written. Does that make sense? You may not like what I've written, and that's okay. That's not part of my equation. The part of my equation is my writing and my development as an artist. And that really is, all of the debates that happen about what is it this, is it that, really, I don't care. I really do not care. And I find them to be, poetry is a small field in a small park on the edge of Wigan. So I have no pretensions to want to be more than what it is, which is the greatest thing on earth. And it doesn't have to be to you, and it doesn't have to be to an audience, but it is to me, and that's the relationship I have with it. Everything else can go blow, to be frank.
Well, no, I think I don't agree with you. It is the greatest thing on earth. For one, it's the oldest art form. It's the very first time anybody killed an antelope and came back and talked about it. He talked in verse.
Yes.
And performed.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And here it's the one art form that everybody in their lives has tried to do at some point or the other.
Yes.
It's the only form of art that you can do without any equipment or props, or you can do it on the back on the loop while catching a bus.
Yes.
So, to say it's not, of course it's the greatest. That doesn't mean it's always good.
No, absolutely.
It doesn't have to be.
Absolutely. Some of the best poetry that's written is is never seen. It's written between a father and his child when his child passed, or when his child had a momentous occasion, and the poem is written, therefore, and performed to the person, and therefore published, and it's the perfect relationship between writing, publication, and audience, and none of us see those poems. So I think that that's where that's. Sorry, I said that for a reason, and
Go on.
I've got a voice in the back of my head. It's going, "Get off your rubbish." I've got another one. It's going, "No, you're doing all right, carry on." I've got one at the back, and it's going, "Give me some dialogue." I'm looking for dialogue. I know that. No. It wasn't connected to us. It was connected to me.
Which brings, anyway, that will be another point in a moment. I just wanted to ask,
Yes.
Again, talking about myself as a poet. Well, rhyme, yes, we all use rhyme. I try to use as little of it as I possibly can. And that's an honest statement, but I find rhyme tends to give too much direction to my thought. So I try to avoid it and use other means of creating music than rhyme.
Yeah.
The kind of poetry you're doing is heavily rhyme influenced. I'm not saying that's good or that's bad.
Well, you've set it up in a particular way there. I've got to be absolutely frank with you. However,
about myself.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I really do understand. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a great piece of literature, and I've performed it and read it, and it's complex, and there's just good poetry and bad poetry. Come on, I mean, but then even when you say that, I think, well, no, there's good rhyming poetry that you'll like, and there's rhyming poetry that you won't like. There's free verse that you'll like, and free verse that you won't.
No, absolutely. But I'm just saying, as a poet, I find rhyme restricts me.
Yeah, and
you're accepting that restriction.
Yeah, no. Whichever form you use, you should be liberated by. If you find it restricts you that's restricting it. I mean, if you look at all the great works that have happened through using rhyme, then the only reason that you are not experiencing its power is that you're deciding as an artist, and there's nothing wrong with this, not to take that route for all kinds of reasons which we could debate.
Yeah.
This is a good interview because you've really got it's good. It's good for you. It's hell for me. It's not, I'm joking. This is good, yeah.
Okay, we need to talk about you also and come back to the poetry in a minute, but we need to talk about you also a little. I'm sure a lot of people want to know about you. You're from Lancashire.
I'm from Lancashire.
I know.
Yeah.
And that your parents came from Ethiopia. That we know. The rest.
I am a collection of molecules. I am Ethiopian. I am British. I'm born British. I was born in England, but my parents are from Ethiopia and Eritrea. I am an egg. I was born by a tree and the full moon, and the full moon came through. This is how I became a writer. Full moon came through the window and hit my eye, and then a little wolf dived through and took me by the nape of my neck and bounded through the woods and then left me by a tree. I was found by a hermit, the same hermit in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, who took me to a boat, and we went out into the sea, and it was there that I was told that I was a poet and thrown over the side. That's just for all the writers in here. Whenever anybody says to you, how did you start writing? That's not what you asked.
When did you not write?
Yeah, when did I not write and when was I not a writer? And I think that even if you start writing, a young writer is somebody who could start writing when they're 70 years of age. I think, seriously, I genuinely mean that. You're not, youth in writing is quite, and actually you're always young in your writing. You're always facing a naked page. And it's always incredibly frightening, as you were in your teenage years, about everything. And it's a funny thing. But I was, my story is that my mother came to England to have me, she came to England. Oh, do I have to talk about this? Do I have to? I mean, I don't mind doing it. I do. Sorry, that was disrespectful. Hiya. My mother came to study in England in the late 60s, just a few weeks before the Enoch Powell speech, the Rivers of Blood speech. It became a famous speech in England, and just a few months before Martin Luther King was killed, just before the Beatles released the White Album, which was actually called the Beatles album, which only became the White Album in America. And you have to understand, even though the album was all white, that the words white and black were never more potent in the 20th century than in the late 60s. The words black and the words white, they were utterly associated with race then, more than they've ever been in my lifetime of 22 years. And my mother came to the country, and she came to study from Ethiopia. And she gave birth to me. She found herself pregnant, as women did in the 60s. They just found themselves pregnant. Isn't it amazing how that happened? She fell pregnant. As you do, she fell pregnant. And in England in the late 60s, which is all coming to light now because these matters do come to light only many years later, but because the children of those matters start to articulate what happened. But in England, there was a process that happened for a woman who was pregnant without a husband. She was put into, often sent away from her parents. The aristocrats, they didn't do this. The aristocrats just kept it in the family. They were having babies all over the place. But they kept it in-house, and that's all good. I mean, I'm sure most people would if they could have afforded it. So she gave birth to me, and she approached us. She was sent to the north of England. She was studying in Oxfordshire, in Bracknell, and it was Oxfordshire then. And she came to England. She came to the north of England to have me. She was sent away from the college where she was studying, and she met a social worker who was basically that practice to get women who were single to sign the adoption papers. So working class women and middle class women in England would send their daughters away from the community into these mother and baby homes where they would say that they'd just gone because they were not well, or they were gone to visit their auntie. The social worker would liaise with the mother and baby homes, which were run mainly by nuns, and the woman at her most vulnerable time in the bridge between childhood and adulthood was coerced into signing the adoption papers and often told that she could see the child a little later on. The foster parent, the adoptive parents were lined up, the child was adopted, the woman had signed the papers, and she would never see them again. This curation of narrative for that child as it's grow is fascinating to me. It reflects a lot on the culture that I'm from in England. My mother refused to sign the adoption papers. She said, I just want him fostered while I study, and then I'll take him back to Ethiopia. The social worker gave me to adoptive parents and said, treat this as an adoption. He's yours forever. His name is Norman. Don't you dare laugh, Carmilla. His name is Norman. I have to finish this story now, I'm afraid, but his name is Norman. The foster parents who saw me as a sign from God were going to train me into becoming a preacher so that I could go back to Africa and save all the poor black babies. I thought they were my mum and dad, and they were saving a child. That's what they were doing. And I was the child that they had saved from an evil woman who'd left me forever and had no interest. And I didn't like her either. They, at 11 years old, they surmised, because I started to take biscuits from the tin without saying please and thank you. I started to stay out a bit late. They'd surmised that the devil was inside of me and that I was a Trojan horse who'd been sent into their family. They had to convince me that this was true. And they did. I believed it. I spent all those 11 years praying, going to church. They were Baptists. They were very, very deep Baptists. I'm not against the Baptist faith, but they were, because in baptism you get baptized in water. So I went to church for years thinking it was like the swimming baths, so that it was like doubled up, but obviously I was wrong. Anyway, they believed that the devil was inside of me, especially when I sat at the breakfast table and said, pass me the salt. Do you know what I mean? And so at 11 years of age, they put me into children's homes and said that they would never write to me or contact me ever again. They convinced me that it was me that put me into children's homes by, at 11 years old, sitting me on the table and telling me that I didn't love them and telling me that I should come back in 24 hours and study the Bible and tell them whether I did or not. And I said to them, I mustn't love you, but I will ask God for forgiveness, because I thought that's what you do in the Bible. My foster mother said, because you don't love us, clearly you don't want to be with us. The next day, my social worker was waiting for me in the car. I lost everybody. What they tried to do was to curate narrative. I lost my granddad, my grandmas, my aunts, my old cousins. I started to understand in my late teens that all family is a group of disputed memories between one group of people over a lifetime. All family is a group of people proving that each other exists over a lifetime. Birthdays, marriages, deaths, blah. All like, oh yeah, you're still here, are you? You know, a continuing of the narrative is just as much about the negative as it is about the positive. It's just as much about defining who you are against what your parents are, say, as it is about having a relationship where you want to be like them. I realized that I didn't have a point of reference. I realized that I was my own echo. I realized that for everything I did, I had nobody to prove against or to. I realized that this should kill me, that I should, if a tree falls in the forest and it isn't heard, did it fall? I was the tree in the forest, not falling. I realized at 18 years of age, after being in 5 different children's homes, that I didn't know anybody that knew me for longer than a year. I realized that family is not about what you think family is, but about the fact that it is. It's all relative. It's all relative. And I realized I didn't have that. And I realized that was mind-blowing, to be honest. I left the children's homes at 18 and I was given my birth certificate because they had to give a birth certificate to a responsible adult. I had no responsible adult. So they had to give it to me. And my birth certificate said Lemn Sissay on it. And it said my mother's name, Lemn Sissay. The social worker was so angry with what happened to me, he gave me letters from my mother dated 1968 from my files, pleading for me back to the social worker to whom she'd given me to for a short period of time while she studied. She said, I want him to be with his own people in his own country. I don't want him to face discrimination. Why would a 21-year-old woman visiting England, which had a great relationship with Ethiopia then, say, I don't want him to face discrimination? From that letter, I spent most of my adult life, up until 32, searching for my family. I found my mother at 21 years of age. She fled Ethiopia. She married the vice minister to finance under the emperor Haile Selassie. She fled Ethiopia because of the revolution in 1974. She works for the United Nations. And but what did she see when I saw her? She saw the last time she saw him, my father, because I looked like him. She didn't see me. The memory of what happened between them ignited. The memory of what she'd built her life on, that first trauma of childhood that she had grown from, had become calloused and restricted. Everybody loved my mum. Everybody liked her. She was young of mind, of heart, but I was a frightening memory to her that she had overcome, a physical reminder. So it took another 10 years for us to try and build a relationship. It took 10 years for her to tell me who I was. My first book in England came out at 21, same age as I found my mother. And the Guardian newspaper said, Lemn Sissay has success written all over his forehead. And I knew then, as I know that now, that it was dangerous to have any idea of what other people feel is success, and without having this fundamental knowledge of where I was from regarding my parents. At 32 years of age, so I used all my resources in the little way that I was known in England. I used my resources to seek out my family. And I followed my mum across the world because she kept disappearing because of the UN, she would work in different countries. She's a good woman. And then at 32, in 1995, I made a documentary with the BBC. I was asked to do a documentary on poetry with a man called Peter Symes, a great documentary filmmaker, made films with Jackie Kay, actually. And Fred de Gois, he did a series called Picture This. And he offered me to do a documentary on me, and I said I wanted to find my father. I got the name of my father from my mother, and then we made the documentary. He was a pilot for Ethiopian Airlines, and I found he died in 1974. His plane crashed in the Simien Mountains on New Year's Day in 1973-4. And I found the plane, and I found all my sisters and brothers, and then I traveled across America and found my aunts and my uncles, who were my father's brothers and sisters, and I was like a gift for them. I wrote about this story. I wrote a play. My name, Lemn, in Amharic, the language of Ethiopia, is why. Why? It's like a strange name to have. In that same letter that I was given, my mother says, I want his second name to be Gide, which is my father's first name. In Ethiopia, you call your firstborns, the second name is the father's first name. Yeah? But because my mother was in England, I had to take her second name, Y. Sissay. But actually, his name, it should be Y. Gide. And I wrote about this when I wrote a play, which I toured around the world, all over the world it's been. And my family heard about it, and none of them will talk to me. Within 5 years of finding them, they cut me off. Never have a writer in the family. That's the thing. So I've now got a fully dysfunctional family, just like everybody else. You know what I mean? So it's all good. But my story never gets in the way of. It's nothing compared to the power of poetry, and which has told the great stories of our times. And that I have a story, and that I love reading, does not take away from the most intimate moments that you can have as a writer is with just when there's nobody there. Are you okay? Are you all right? By the way, I'm just going to say one more thing. I've proved all of this because I was aware that nobody could confirm any memories. So I've made television documentary, 1995. It's online. It's called Internal Flight with the BBC. I made a radio documentary in 2010 where I went back to the children's homes for my files of 18 whole files of 18 years of life in care, because the files are being looked by a digital company called the Iron Mountain. It's Orwellian. It's Orwellian. And the Iron Mountain cannot find my files. That also is on my That is also on my website. So that really is my story, I guess. And this is not therapy, by the way. And art is not therapy. Therapy is therapy. And it's good. If you need it, get it. It's really important you know that. I'm not offloading here. I'm sharing a story with you. And that's really important you know that as well. And I believe that one day the people shall be free.
I think we've got time for one more poem.
Okay.
Make time for one more poem.
Okay. This reading has not been as I expected it to be, and I apologize for not putting that microphone on, by the way. But if somebody would have said, I would have put that on, and I just... I'm sorry. One more poem after that. One more poem after that. One more poem after that. It's funny because your biog can get in the way of your writing. And so I want you to see this reading as a sharing of... Which one?
You taking questions?
Oh, yes, I should, yes. Can I take questions?
You don't want another poem?
No, but I'd like to...
Let's have some questions. Well, okay.
If Bina Shah says take questions, we take questions. Okay.
Poem or questions?
Okay, never give it to the audience. You should know that. I'm sure you... It's like teaching. Whenever you say to kids, so, shall we do this or do that? By the way, I'm not saying that your children... not infantilizing you. Actually, I wonder if you can infantilize infants. I'm sure you can, actually. Interesting. I have no idea what to read to you, actually. I'm a little discombobulated. So... This poem is about relationships, okay? So this is, I have been asked, I was seeing somebody, and she said, tell me a little bit about yourself. We were at a restaurant, so I stood on the table, told everybody to be quiet, and I read her this poem. I like Rex, I like X, because she wanted to know, and I just want you to imagine her face changing as I read this. I like Rex, I like ex-junkies, I like flunks and ex-flunkies, I like the way the careerless career, I can't leave this poem as a memory for you. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't. I've got a voice in the back of my head saying they're going to go away with this poem, and it's wrong. So I'll read a poem called Gold from the Stone. I do, when I read, like to deconstruct any idea of what I am, which makes me an acquired taste. Gold from the stone, oil from the earth, I yearned for my home from the time of my birth. Strength of a mother's whisper shall carry me until the hand of my lost sister joins onto my will. Root to the earth, blood from the heart, could never from birth be broken apart. Food from the platter, water from the rain, the subject and the matter. I'm going home again. You can't sell a leaf to a tree, nor the wind to the atmosphere. I know where I'm meant to be, and I can't be satisfied here. You can't give light to the moon, nor mist to the drifting clouds. I shall be leaving here soon, costumed, cultured, and crowned. Sugar from the cane, coal from the wood, water from the rain, life from the blood, gold from the stone. How am I doing? Oil from the earth. I yearned for my home ever since. How am I doing? Doing okay? Gold from the stone, oil from the earth. I yearn for my home from the time of my birth. Strength of a mother's whisper shall carry me until the hand of my lost sister joins onto my will. Root to the earth, blood from the heart could never from birth be broken apart. Food from the platter, water from the rain. No, we're doing okay? It's cultural enough. Food from the platter, water from the rain, the subject and the matter. I'm going home again. I want you to know this, because I'm not a tricks and bells and whistles person, but I knew what I was doing then. I knew what I was doing when I was stopping the poem and I was asking you how I'm doing. And I kind of like to break the poem apart as I'm reading it, because it can all seem so slick. And it never was, and we're not. And you know what? That's okay.
Okay, let's take some questions, since I have the only hand mic around here.
You can shout, maybe? No, okay. Yeah, that's better, yeah. And we can use this. Okay, so questions, folks. I know it's difficult sometimes when you throw questions after I've been speaking for so long, and I understand that. But if you have a question, it would be nice. Did you like that first poem, by the way? The one about the wings? Yeah? Okay, good. There must be one question.
I have a question, all right. No,
Oh,
let's-
yes.
It's your second visit to Pakistan.
Yes.
And you wrote such a great blog post about your experience yesterday with the kids.
Yes.
And so just what does it mean to you to be here?
Okay, well, it's incredible. But I want to give you more than that. But it's quite incredible. The Pakistani people that I've met, I feel blessed and lucky to have met. And also to be able to share my work is a real honor, and to be asked. You know, Amina Saeed saw me in Gaul at the Literature Festival in a little room. There was hardly anybody there, you know, because everybody's there for the novelist and yada yada. The poets are like, please, me, can I go? So anyway, I did my read. It was like 12 people, 15 people, you know, and she came up to me afterwards and she said, that's it. I want you to come. I want you to be here. And the British Council as well. And it's that kind of magical moment. Somebody says, I understand you. I get you. I want this here. That is where, that's, for me, that's the beginning of the light, and I just need to walk in that direction. Instinctively, I know it's going to be good. And as it unfolds, it has been. I mean, I read yesterday in front of a group of children, I wrote in the blog, you know, they were quick-witted. They were way ahead of me, you know, 16 years of age. And it was just a great gig, you know. And any artist, any writer, you know, loves to read with people who appreciate them. And it's a wonderful thing, you know. So I've come to a cultured, complex society full of cultured, complex people. So, you know, I'm at home, you know what I mean? And I'm learning as well. And I think that's actually a great thing about coming to a place like Pakistan. And I'll carry that with me, you know. Also, one of my best friends, you know, I'm not one of the person to say that, but one of my best friends is from Pakistan. So, you know.
Okay, I want to thank you first for reading the poem to us. I also want to say, I don't agree that if a poet has written a poem and he's put his whole heart into the way he expresses itself, that it is necessary that the next person should immediately absorb what he was saying in his manner. The literature that you write should be so good, which it is, as the way you have written, that we could get many more nuances and many more shades into it, which you, in your emotion, may not have been able to communicate.
Yes,
so
that's great.
It's very interesting to see you doing it. But if I had the poetry and I read it myself, maybe I would give it much more depth or much more analysis in solitude than it is there. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a really great point, because I feel sometimes that I get in the way of the poem, and that I absolutely understand your point. Yeah, it's a wonderful point. Okay, folks. Oh yes, Carmilla. By the way, it's such an honour to meet Carmilla here, because I've known of Ms. Shamsi for a long time, and so, as I said to you yesterday, I just want you to know that.
It's lovely to have you here, Lem. You know, the one thing no one said about Lem is he actually had a poem in Olympic Park.
Oh yes,
You're walking on Olympic Park, and there's a Lemn Sissay poem as part of the installation, amidst everything else. You said quite rightly that, you know, poetry is there with us from the beginning, but I wondered for you at what point you became aware of poetry as something that was important in your life. And I think particularly as you were talking, I don't know whether you saw the Jeanette Winterson.
We have a very similar story. I mean, extremely similar, even from Lancashire.
Absolutely, and she talked a lot about how, and for people who don't know, Jeanette was adopted, and her parents wanted her to be a preacher, and she disappointed in all kinds of ways. And she talks a lot about how important books were to her at a certain point. So I wonder for you whether you could talk a little about that aspect of things.
I've come to admit this, that guillotine separation that happened at 11 left me with the previous 11 years, which were, I read the Bible like so many times. And the Bible, like the Quran, like most of the religious texts, uses the environment, uses metaphor, uses symbolism, analogy, all of those, very obvious sort of poetic structures. But my way of understanding the world was that way. Things symbolized other things. Things were metaphors for other things. Sorry, were metaphors. Metaphors for other things. No, but I was just listening to that sentence is actually quite dodgy. And that's how I understood the world. And my foster father was an English teacher. So, T.S. Eliot's Old Possum, I can't even remember what the book's called, but... So I formed a relationship with it at school. I had just got a Facebook message the other day from somebody saying, I remember you reading a poem at school on the last day. It was pretty risque, but it was great. And so from very early on, I think. And a lot of poets, surprising amount of poets do, Sylvia Plath was published at, in her teens. A first poem, not a book, obviously.
I think before they throw us out of this hall,
okay.
we should close. I don't need...
That's good.
So we've, I think, had a very interesting, pleasant hour with Why Say, if I may call you that.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
And Lemn Sissay.
But isn't it amazing that I'm a poet as well and my name is Why? Isn't that incredible? That name on my birth certificate from 1967, and when I get it, when I'm 18, and I'm a poet. That's just incredible.
Yes, Norman.
Yeah, thank you. You had to, didn't you?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And
And thank you as well.